Very good. Quorum has been established. Thank you. Motion on reference of bills. Moved by Senator Ahlquist, second by Senator Fuller. Please,
I did have
Senator Harman.
I'm in support, but I did have just a comment on the newly created Governance and Finance Committee. It's my understanding that the jurisdiction of that committee has not been established yet, and we're referring bills to that committee today. That's okay with me, but I think we should move forward to clearly establish what areas of jurisdiction is that committee going to have.
We will make sure that that's clear and brought before the Rules Committee. I can tell you that the idea behind the committee was to consolidate sort of the broad umbrella of reform-related efforts,
right.
And specifically, given the governor's budget proposal, a place to be able to vet various forms of realignment
Sure.
and restructuring. And I think we'll proceed accordingly. We know that in the budget context, there aren't usually bills, right? I mean, at least at the beginning of the process. So we'll work together and make sure that
Thank you,
works out.
Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that.
No problem, of course. All right, so let's call the roll then on the motion.
Senators Ahlquist?
Aye.
Ahlquist, aye. DeLeon?
Aye.
DeLeon, aye. Fuller?
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Harman?
Aye.
Harman, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
Governor's appointees appearing today, we have one, and it's Jeffrey S. Mason, who is being considered as Chief of the Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. Jeff? Mr. Mason, I should say. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rules Committee. We have a tradition here in the Rules Committee that we want to invite any nominee to introduce their family, and we happen to know your family. But I think for everybody else, it would be a pleasure if you introduce them.
It'll be my pleasure. My wife, Donna, my daughter, Maddie, and my son, Bennett. So, yeah.
They've grown up. Yep.
Yes, they do that.
Used to hang out in the park a little with them.
Yeah.
The kids,
No,
but, you know.
The best job I have, so yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It's the hardest job.
The hardest
Yes,
job,
exactly.
without a doubt. So, Mr. Mason, tell us a little bit about why you are qualified for this job and why you want to do it.
Sure. First of all, thanks for meeting with us today. I took this appointment in January of last year, 2010. When I entered the job, one thing I realized is that previous chiefs, most of those folks, had this extensive background in law enforcement, multiplicity of levels. My resume is very, very different from that. It's pretty much a resume built of managing in various capacities in the private sector over the last 15-plus years, managing projects and processes, team stuff. But when I started, it became apparent to me that what I offered kind of fit at this time period in the Bureau's history. We needed to focus on processes and procedures, getting ourselves to be more efficient. So last year, we kind of had two big goals. First was to be more efficient, how quickly we licensed our folks, how quickly we worked our enforcement cases, and the second piece is how we dealt with unlicensed activity. On the first one, if you look at our numbers, we've made some nice gains. On the enforcement side, at the end of 2009, it was taking us about 129 days on average to work an enforcement case. At the end of last year, we had the number down to about 100 days. So some nice shrinkage there. The biggest piece, though, is our licensing timelines. If you look at our security guard licenses, which is about 85% of what we do, we issued about 67,000 new security guard cards last fiscal year. In September of 2009, it was taking us about 48 days on average to issue a new security guard card. At the end of last year, we had shrunk that number down to 23 days. And what that really means is the average applicant for a security guard is getting to work a month earlier and getting a paycheck a month earlier. And that's kind of the key of what we do. The second piece was working on unlicensed activity. Previous to 2009, we were a very reactive body. The Bureau mainly worked tips, worked complaints. Beginning in 2009, under the leadership of Connie Trujillo, the philosophy changed to being more proactive, actually looking for unlicensed activity. And then last year, we continued that trend, launched a few new programs to where, if you look at last year, all of our cases that we generated to investigate unlicensed activity, that number's grown by 62%. So we obviously are doing a better job of actually looking for unlicensed activity and shutting it down when we can. I know today's kind of about what Jeff has done in the past year, but I just needed to say that so much of our gains are really due to the folks who work at the Bureau. They're incredibly professional, incredibly dedicated, and at all levels, be it the Deputy Chief Connie Trujillo, to the management team, to the folks who work there, every objective we put in front of them, they've knocked out of the park, and I couldn't be more appreciative and, frankly, more proud. So, thank you.
You know, as we understand it, there is no certification or training prerequisite necessary to get a license. Is that correct?
Well, for security guards, there is a required set of license of training, but it has to happen within a certain time period of you taking licensure. But there is a specific...
It's post-licensure.
Yes, and there is a training course. There is no... that is prescribed. It's 16 hours of training, for instance, that is required as part of to become a security guard.
On-the-job training, or is it separate?
It's actual separate. It can be you'll find institutions around the state that actually have classroom training on observe and report, powers to arrest, things like that. Just the basics of security guard. We don't actually have a dictated course outline, but we have a syllabus that is prescribed that they have to follow.
Do you think the qualifications or the criteria to become licensed are sufficient to assure public safety?
For security guards, yes. And the nice thing, too, is you go the extra step to I want to be a guard and also carry a sidearm. That's a whole different level of qualification. You have to actually go out and qualify, be trained on firearms, etc. So the separation is there. It seems in our viewpoint. We don't have enough things that show us that the current training is not adequate. So,
questions?
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned the training component.
Yeah.
Does the person do all of the training component before they actually protect companies and people? And
yeah, the typical model is you go to a classroom setting, you get trained, and then you apply for licensure. That's a typical model.
Okay, thank
yes.
you. My question, though, was you're in charge of regulating several industries, including security guards and locksmiths and repossession agents. And of all those industries, which has the highest occurrence of fraud, and how big of a problem is it, and how do you tackle that?
You mean as far as unlicensed activity or licensees?
Well, I guess it's two different categories, really.
The biggest issue we're seeing on the fraud side, be it unlicensed or licensed folks, is on the locksmith side. Consumers are pretty vulnerable there.
Yes.
And it's mainly due to just the huge growth in unlicensed activity on that side. Most of these folks are mobile. They advertise through Craigslist, etc. People, when they need someone the most, they'll pull up their smartphone and find whomever, and their whole goal is to get into their house or get into their car, and they don't do the license verification you tend to see with hiring a private investigator, etc. The locksmith seems to be the area that we have the most complaints about.
So do you see anything, I mean, it's going to sound a little weird here,
Yeah,
but
right.
it's been a long day. If I were to go to the Yellow Pages, and a locksmith has a number, whether they would get with the state, are there cases where somebody actually sort of creates a number and is therefore really unlicensed? And do you tackle situations like that proactively?
We, be it Yellow Pages, be it Craigslist, be it Penny Savers, we see folks who don't use license numbers who advertise. We see folks who use pretend license numbers and advertise. We do surveys. The biggest thing we're doing for both locksmiths and private investigators right now is through a lot of search word technologies. I get a report every day of new Craigslist ads that fit certain profiles, and I review every single one of those every day to, is this person licensed, not unlicensed? If they're not unlicensed, we try to reach out to them. Private investigators, it tends to be someone who's watched too much TV and says, I can follow people around. We educate them. They tend to go away. Locksmith is a little more challenging right now just because they're purposely engaged in this activity. The other challenge with the Locksmith Act is there's no test required. You pay your money, you apply. If you pass a criminal background check, you're licensed.
Really?
If you're doing work that's $500 or more, you need to have also a license with the Contractors Board. But if you're just working that $499 down, you paid your money, you're licensed, you're good to go. That's the limitations we're seeing right now with that, is that we have locksmiths who are very professional saying that guy shouldn't be a locksmith, but they're licensed. Is the challenge.
And so what can you do about that?
As far as
$499 and below.
well, that's legislation. That's what the current act mandates.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah.
You have enough money to monitor, the problems here and to enforce violations of the law?
There's never going to be enough money, but you find new ways to do it. For instance, before no one was monitoring Craigslist, it takes me maybe 3 hours a week to review all the new ads. And we catch a lot of folks before they start.
Oh, interesting.
It's just very smart to just set up a search word. You get an email every day that said, here's new ads in every city in Craigslist. That was the main place that private investigators that were unlicensed were advertising as Craigslist.
Okay.
Now we're finding those guys. So,
Other senators? Or Senator Harmon first?
Well, I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman, but I did have opportunity to meet with Mr. Mason in my office here in the Capitol, and I was pleased with the responses he had to the questions that I asked him, and I'm fully supportive.
Very good. Senator De Leon?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mason,
Yes.
I don't know you. I've never met you before, but I do know your wife, Donna Kaler.
Okay.
And she is a nice person, so that does count a lot in this weighted formula system with regards to
Okay,
confirmation. So I do want to say that. You actually partially answered the question, and Senator Alquist tackled the question head-on with regards to unlicensed activity. This is an issue, obviously, that's very pervasive in the district that I represent with regards to unlicensed activity. It's my understanding that the Bureau right now is promulgating regulations at this moment with regards to unlicensed activity, citations, fines. Obviously, you're giving your opinion with regards to if it's pervasive and widespread. Do you think that these regulations, the citations as well as fines, will help sort of curb this activity and will be an effective deterrent?
Yeah, what Sir De Leon's speaking to is that currently, when it comes to unlicensed activity, none of our acts allow me to go out and write a ticket for the activity. I actually have to go to the district attorney and say, please take care of this for us. Or if we go out on sweeps with local law enforcement, they'll write the ticket for the unlicensed guard. Our next tool is we have regulations. We're at kind of the agency level right now getting those approved. That will give us the additional tool that we'll be able to cite and fine for unlicensed activity. It's not going to cure the problem, but right now, basically, I tell folks, stop it or else. I'll go to your district attorney, and a lot of these folks know that due to resources, they're not going to take the unlicensed locksmith case until something really bad happens. So this gives me something more than stop it or else. I can actually write a ticket now and find them that way. So it's just another tool to use in what we're trying to do to attack the problem.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Fuller?
Given your private sector experience and your time with the Bureau, have you done some efficiencies that have helped make everything go better? It seems like you've, reduced the average number of days to clear the licenses, and yet you haven't had a tremendous increase in costs. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's I think all of us, when you start something new, you kind of go to what you know best. My background's in process management, and it's just you sit down with the people who do the processes in a room with a whiteboard, and you map out every process as granular as you can. You look for bottlenecks, you look for roadblocks, you look for duplication that's unnecessary, you look for opportunities to streamline things down, and we were able to find, this piece of the process is bogging us down, or this group of applications is aged over 30 days, so let's tackle those first. The business systems we have at the Bureau, unlike a lot of places, you either have pending or approved. There isn't pending and where are you in the pending state, so it's hard to break that down. So we've just basically been using our process management, process review, looking for those opportunities. We got rid of the most aged cases. That, of course, statistically will shrink your number down nicely. And then the goal is every so often, because as you do the day-to-day stuff, you tend to tack on to processes. So it's good to sit down periodically and, once again, map it out, look for duplication, look for roadblocks, things like that. All of it's been low-hanging fruit, but it still gains. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you. Are there witnesses in support of the nominee? Come on up if... Well, I think the nominee is, let's say, non-controversial here. So you can probably limit your testimony, if you don't mind, as we get to a vote. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, for allowing me to.
Right in the mic. Name and...
My name is Brian Baer. I'm a 35-year veteran of the security industry and a small business owner here in Sacramento, California. I'm also the vice president of CalSAG. It's a California Alliance of Licensed Security Agencies and Associates. It's Guards and Associates. God, it's a long one. We've worked tirelessly with the different bureaus, chiefs, as they've come through. And this is by far the best one, in my opinion. He's taken a business approach and to attack a problemed area. He has humor. He has a creative approach to things. It's something special in a human being, you'll see. We have seen him come in and just say flat out, folks, I was surprised. I got to work, looked at the computer system, and I found out we were still on DOS. It's amazing for the rest of us to consider a computer system still on DOS and how he makes it function. While the average days for the security licensing is down to 23 or 26, we see licenses coming out in 4 to 6 days when they're done online. It's definitely an amazing turnaround. On behalf of CalSAG and the 60,000 security officers CalSAG represents, 60,000, tax-paying security officers that CalSAG represents, we strongly urge you to confirm, Mr. Mason.
Mr. Mason, could we please see an example of your humor?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Steve Katalika. I represent the California Association of Licensed Repossessors, where our membership is under the jurisdiction of the BSIS, and we've enjoyed our close working relationship with the Bureau as well as Chief Mason, and we are in strong support of his confirmation. We work, as the investigators do, tirelessly to elevate our profession and the safety and the consumer protections within the Collateral Recovery Act, and we've appreciated working with Chief Mason throughout this time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators, Chairman. My name is Francie Kaler. I'm past president and current legislative chair for the California Association of Licensed Investigators. And I have had the pleasure of working with Mr. Mason for the past year and have found him completely responsive to issues that come up with our private investigator community. And I've also found him to have a good sense of humor. And have found it interesting, because he came from the private sector, not a government entity, to be referred to as a customer. I thought that was pretty interesting instead of a licensee. So I like being a customer, and our organization supports his confirmation. We find him, as I said, responsive, interested in our issues, willing to make changes if he analyzes the situation and sees a change needs to be made, and have found his staff to be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Diaz. I'm actually representing two different associations. The primary one is the Chief Special Agents Association of California, which was founded, interestingly enough, in 1927. So we've been around a number of years. We have members throughout the state that are private security directors, contract security managers, and proprietary security managers throughout the state. And we've had the opportunity to work with the designee for the chief of the Bureau, Jeffrey Mason, for the past year and a half. He's actually spoke at one of our meetings. His skills from the private sector complement very well his ability to work the issues that face our members, the businesses that we are in, and the consuming public that we serve. And the Chief Special Agents Association wholeheartedly and strongly recommends you support his confirmation. I'm also, on the other hand, with a private investigative association called Certified Professional Investigators within the state of California. We've been around for about 10 years, and I am chair of the advisory board to CIPI, and they too would like to go on record as supporting Jeff Mason as the chief of the Bureau of Security Investigative Services. We represent a number of private investigators throughout the state, licensed by BSIS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there other witnesses in support? Any witnesses in opposition to the nominee? If not, is there some? I'm sorry. Like Senator Harmon, I happily support the nomination. And it is my understanding that the Brown administration also supports the nomination going forward. January the 25th is your one-year deadline, which means that if this passes out of committee this afternoon, we'll take the nomination directly to the floor tomorrow for a vote to meet that one-year timeline. Motion? Motion by Senator De Leon. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist?
Aye.
Alquist, aye. De Leon?
Aye.
De Leon, aye. Fuller?
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
Congratulations, and thank you for your public service, Mason. And thank you, Ms. Kaler and children. Appreciate it. Very good. All right, we have a couple more items. File item 3, is there a motion? Senator Harmon.
Yes, I wonder on the item number 3 if we could divide the question as to the two individuals mentioned in the motion. We could vote on one and vote on the other.
That would be fine, of course. Of course, whatever.
Thank you very much.
Whatever you want.
We could do Senator Berryhill first.
Senator Barrett to replace Senator Berryhill first. Let's make that Senator De Leon's motion. It's not a problem. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist?
Aye.
Alquist, aye. De Leon?
Aye.
De Leon, aye. Fuller?
No.
Fuller, no. Harmon?
No.
Harmon, no. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
Motion passes 3-2. The second part of the question is to appoint Senator Cannella as chair to the Senate Committee on Agriculture.
I'd make the motion.
Moved by Senator Harmon. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist?
Aye.
Alquist, aye. De Leon?
Aye.
De Leon, aye. Fuller?
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
That motion passes 5-0. Very good. Thank you. Items. Any questions on items 4 or 5? Motion? Moved by Senator Harmon. Please call the roll.
Senators Alquist?
Aye.
Alquist, aye. De Leon? De Leon, aye. Fuller?
Aye.
Fuller, aye. Harmon?
Aye.
Harmon, aye. Steinberg?
Aye.
Steinberg, aye.
Very good. We do have an executive session. I'd like to ask the members of the public to leave here.